My name is Phil Peters. I am the co-founder and CEO of Accuray, and we're developing a non-invasive intracardiac pressure monitoring device for improved heart failure management. When you're managing a heart failure patient, you have a few different tools at your disposal to understand these patients and to see how they're responding to therapy, right? So you will typically do an echocardiography, you will typically do a blood-based biomarker test such as NT-proBNP, you will do an auscultation with your stethoscope, and you will look at the physical symptoms, right? Altogether quite time-consuming, but I think what's more challenging there is that these aren't entirely accurate tools in terms of assessing the congestion of these patients. Unfortunately, decisions that get made that shouldn't be made, primarily on discharge, right? So some studies have shown that over 40% of heart failure patients in the US are actually being discharged when they have some form of residual congestion. And these are the patients that then have a higher likelihood of coming back to the hospital with another acute decompensation and acute readmission just a few days later. And as we know, heart failure has one of the highest readmission rates out of all patient groups. And it's precisely these readmissions that are so costly for both the healthcare system, but also cause a permanent deterioration in the cardiac health of these patients. And that's what we're there to help avoid. Heart failure patients are notoriously difficult to manage. And one of the main reasons for that is that there really aren't any good monitoring tools out there today. Monitoring the intracardiac pressures, or what's known as the blood pressures inside the heart, is one of the best ways to effectively manage these patients. The problem that remains today is that the only way to get at these pressures is to measure them invasively, so with a right heart catheterization or implantable sensors, and we are changing the game by making all of that non-invasive. We are primarily focused on the in-hospital setting, so helping manage hospitalized heart failure patients more efficiently, so reducing the cost of managing those patients and improving outcomes of those patients at the same time. So we're currently finishing our clinical study. It is a 1,500 patient global clinical study spread across 6 countries and 14 hospitals. What we're doing is we're validating our device versus the gold standard, so a right heart catheterization procedure, and this is being done at a number of hospitals here in the US, but also in Canada and 4 countries in Europe. That's the data that we're going to use to submit to the FDA towards the end of this year, and hopefully by the second half of next year we'll be ready to start selling here in the US. So for us, the US is the most important market for a number of reasons. It is where we have the sickest heart failure patients in the world. It is where, for better or worse, the healthcare system pays the most to treat and manage these patients. But it's also where we understand the market the best, right? So the vast bulk of our patients will be Medicare and Medicaid patients, which means that we have one payer to talk to, CMS, and we understand that market very well. It's one language and very similar ways of treating and managing these patients. So for the sake of being able to focus all of our efforts on the most important market, the US is a natural candidate. We are the first device in this category, so we're really defining the playbook for what non-invasive intracardiac pressure monitoring looks like and will look like going forward. We're completing our clinical study by the middle of this year, so June, July of 2024. We're gonna hustle together our regulatory submissions and submit that by the end of this year. And then we have on average 270 days, right, for a de novo application to go through, which means that sometime towards the end of next year, we will be ready to commercialize here in the US. Our CE marking in Europe will follow shortly thereafter, because we are, as I mentioned, doing a global clinical study, so across multiple sites in multiple countries, which will allow us to use that data for both the US, but also for Europe. We raised about 14 million to date. Building a medical device that has a hardware and a software/machine learning component is not a cheap affair. So we've had to raise capital. We've been able to attract some really stellar investors in this seed round, which we closed in early 2024. It's a 9 million round in total, attracting both strategics on the heart failure pharma side, but also hospital systems here in the US and their venture arms, but also some med tech focused VCs out of both the US, but also in Europe. So we feel like we're really getting both commercial support from the strategics as well as the healthcare systems, but then also kind of that medtech VC experience, which I think we need as a team, and we've really benefited from that advice. Really, for the first time in history, we're enabling temporal and longitudinal non-invasive sensing of the intracardiac pressures. What that means is that as a managing cardiologist or nurse or hospitalist in that heart failure patient workflow, you are effectively able to get an understanding of how your patient is responding to medical therapy in real time, and you're much better able to adapt and change that therapy based on the pressures that you're getting from our device. So it really is a paradigm shift in the way we're going to treat and manage heart failure patients, and we see a huge potential to improve outcomes for these patients in that way. 60 million patients worldwide. In the US alone, we're talking at least 6 million patients. In terms of cost to the healthcare system, these patients cost the US healthcare system over $100 billion annually. If we're talking about our specific market segment and projections, we believe the US market to be a 1.5 billion market for the in-hospital market alone. And when we extend that outwards to Europe and Asia and onwards, we're talking a global market of $9 billion. We are super excited about truly transforming heart failure care, right? I think what we're enabling here is a much better understanding of patients that have previously been overlooked and definitely undertreated. And what that is going to enable, particularly in the US market, are new care models. So whether that is facilitating more step-down clinics in the hospital setting, or whether that is facilitating hospital to home / hospital at home programs. We're seeing a lot of interest from precisely those hospital and at home programs from a lot of our clinical partners here in the US. The simple fact of the matter is that wherever there is a heart failure patient, there is value to be had with Accuray. So the Accuray Save sensor system is based on a combination of 4 different sensor technologies. We have seismic sensors, acoustic sensors, visual sensors, as well as electric sensors. You take this handheld device, you place it on your patient's chest, skin contact, you press the start recording button, and within a few seconds it will record. The data will be collected from the sensors. They will be analyzed directly on the device, and within a few seconds the output of the analysis will be presented on the screen. And what you get here is a output of the different intracardiac pressures and other intracardiac hemodynamic parameters, which allows you to get a much better understanding of your patient's condition. You can also sort of see the timeline of different measurements over time to see how your patient has been responding to medical therapy and see how the trend of these pressures are evolving over time. Ultimately, this will give you a much better understanding of your patient's true condition and how you should manage that patient.